as is the case with pretty much everything else on this YouTube channel. I'm just saying stuff that I feel like should be said. So I don't think it's good to remain, completely indifferent or even supportive of people that are religious, because if you're religious, then you are delusional to some degree. Especially the people who believe that they have a relationship with God or Jesus. Like, we cannot encourage these people. It's not healthy. It's basically like telling someone that's schizophrenic that the voices in their head, the voices in their room are real and they should listen to them. That imaginary person in your closet is actually there. You actually do have a relationship with them. Like, imagine if your kid read the Harry Potter series and, started to believe that they actually had a relationship with Harry Potter. That Harry Potter was actually a real life person and you could actually talk to him and he would talk back to you. Like, what if your kid was saying, yeah, I hear Harry Potter talking to me. Harry Potter is telling me to go out and be nicer to my friends and be nicer to my parents. Or if there was, maybe they read the Spider-Man comics and came to the same conclusion. Even though the result is okay, yeah, that's great that you want to be nicer to people, but you can just be nice to people for the sake of being nice to people. There's not a real life Harry Potter. That's not real. Spider-Man isn't actually a real life person. These are all fictional stories, And even if maybe there was one place in Harry Potter or a couple of places that are actually real, I don't know. I don't think I've read any of the Harry Potter books all the way through. Maybe there is one real place in there in England or something. That doesn't mean that the story is actually real or that the characters are real, Same thing with Spider-Man. It takes place in Manhattan. Manhattan is real, but that doesn't mean Spider-Man's real. And so we don't need, if that was your kid, you wouldn't go on and be like, oh yeah, Harry Potter actually is real. Harry Potter actually is the one that's talking to you and telling you to do these things. Yeah, keep talking to Harry Potter, keep listening. We would be like, no, that's not right. If I keep remaining supportive of this belief that is a delusional belief, it's not a real belief. Or it's not a true belief, I should say. If I remain supportive of this delusional belief, then you're going to go into a psychosis of some sort, And that's basically what religious psychosis is. It's the same thing. It's like reading a fictional book and then believing that the characters are real and actually talking to you actively, regularly throughout the day. And I never actually experienced this. I never really experienced this in the way that other people experience it, because I always felt ashamed that I couldn't understand why my family members, why my church members would say that they felt and heard God talking to them, but I never experienced that. So I would kind of pretend or tell myself that I was feeling God when I actually knew I wasn't, so that I could feel like I fit in, that I was doing something right. But ultimately it turned out I was the one that was right in the end, because of course God wasn't talking to my family members or the church members. God wasn't talking to them. They were just experiencing, some form of religious delusion or religious psychosis. Maybe not to the extent of someone mumbling to themselves on the street, but still, some degree of psychosis, because there's levels to it, Just like there's levels to everything. There's levels to anxiety, levels to depression, levels to psychosis. You may not be on the level of like hallucinating visuals or sounds, but you might be delusional or psychotic in the sense that you believe that there's a invisible, non-existent being who is talking to you or sending signals to you in some way. You know, that's not healthy. That's not okay. And I don't like that. The average non-religious person, which is to say just a regular person. I hate having to say like non-religious because it just means you're normal. It's like saying like I'm a non-amputated person, or I have non-amputated arms, I have non-amputated limbs. No, I'm just normal. I just have normal limbs. But I don't like that we're just supposed to remain completely apathetic, completely indifferent to people who are religious, and almost, not even apathetic, but almost like encourage them to believe what they want to believe. Like, I think we should like push back a little bit, you know? Not to try to prove them wrong, you know, not to be like, hey, you're wrong and I'm right. No, that is not the reason. For their own well-being. Like if you had a coworker saying, yeah, I have a great relationship with Harry Potter or with Spider-Man. You know, he's very real and he lives in my heart. You know, you'd be like, you know, you're not okay. You know, you probably like, if you actually cared about him, you know, if it was a coworker you were particularly close with, you might actually kind of like do some more digging to like figure out if they're okay. But for some reason, when someone replaces, you know, the word Harry Potter with Jesus, oh, it's perfectly okay and normal. When it's just as weird. It's just as weird. But yeah, whenever I was a Christian not for emotional reasons like this, not because I ever felt God or heard God or anything, but just because I believed it was the inerrant, unmistakable truth. So why wouldn't I believe it, you know? Just like I believe water is wet and the sun is the only star in our solar system and that the earth is round, you know, I believe that Christianity is real and correct and that God is real and has a relationship with me. Even if I can't feel it, you know. I can't always feel the wind, but I know the wind is out there somewhere. So maybe, you know, if I can't feel the wind, I'm just not in a place where the wind is blowing. You know, if I can't feel God's presence, maybe that just means that I've distanced myself from Him. I'm just not in the right place with God. You know, it's not that God isn't real, it's that I'm doing something wrong. I'm not in the right place. Which is just, you know, you're basically gaslighting yourself, which is basically what pastors do in churches. They gaslight you. Some do it knowingly and some unknowingly, probably, because they're probably gaslighting themselves as well. But yeah, there isn't any God you've distanced yourself from because God isn't real. And you can be like, oh, well, you don't know for certain that God isn't real. Well, I basically do, though. Like, you don't just go around believing in things until you have, like, 1,000% unmistakable evidence that those things aren't real. Like, do you just believe in fairies or you just believe in Santa Claus until someone just shows you, like, blatantly that those things aren't real? Or do you just believe in dragons until someone has proven to you that dragons aren't real? No, because how do you prove that something isn't real? It doesn't make sense. Like, there's no way to prove that dragons aren't real. So do you believe in dragons? Like, how can I prove that to you? Like, would you say, oh, well, you need to show me the corpse of a dragon to prove that dragons aren't real? Well, that wouldn't prove it. That would prove that dragons were real at some point, and now we have a dead one. You know, there wouldn't be any way for me to prove to you that dragons never existed, or that dragons aren't real, because you could always be like, oh, well, you know, maybe you just didn't check every single place. You could always say that. And it's the same thing with God. You can always just be like, oh, well, you know, did you check behind this planet, behind this star? You don't know for sure. Well, I do, though, because there's no evidence for it at all. We've never found the evidence for it. No one has. And you can be like, oh, well, but some people believe in God. Yeah, and some people believe in dragons. Some people believe they have a relationship with Harry Potter, and they're delusional. Just because some people believe in something doesn't mean it's true. So, I just wish we would stop, like, bending to religious people, basically, like, bending a knee to them, giving them space. Because I don't think it's always good to be completely tolerant and be completely willing to give people space, because sometimes people are delusional and mentally and emotionally unwell. I don't think we should have a religious person leading a country. I don't think that's a good idea. Just like we wouldn't want someone who's... Like, you wouldn't want someone who believes they have a personal relationship with Harry Potter to be leading your country. You would probably think that, like, there's some level of maturity that they're lacking. Like, they are just not completely developed in their thinking. But it's just unfortunate because, like, for these religious people, the people that are really, like, fervently religious, they only surround themselves with the religious people, and their whole family is probably religious. So there's really not, all their friends are religious, so there's probably really not anyone that's going to call them out on it. So they just basically make themselves more and more delusional. It's just like a herd mentality. And so they, you get so entrenched in this belief that you have a relationship with God or something, that you start to think that everyone who doesn't have a relationship with God, they're the crazy ones. You guys are the crazy ones because you're not hearing voices in your head. I'm the normal one. I have a relationship with God. I'm God's special child. I'm a child of God. That's weird. That's a really weird thing to say. Like, if I say I'm a child of Harry Potter, I'm a child of a dragon, I'm a child of Spider-Man. Like, it's the same thing. It's very weird. You're saying you're a child of something or someone that isn't real. It's just weird. Like, Jesus is not talking to you. Jesus is not in your heart. And someone needs to tell you that. Because you are doing some level of damage to yourself emotionally and mentally by not completely believing in the truth. By not completely revealing the truth to yourself. And it's just quite bizarre to me how people who are otherwise completely normal can just stray into these wild beliefs, these very wild beliefs. And then when you see them in the office from Monday to Friday, you wouldn't, there doesn't seem to be anything like particularly off about them, but I guess that's just kind of part of the nature of work. Is you're there to do the work. And they need to make money too, so. But I do kind of wish like someone would have just looked me in the eye and been like, you don't have to believe this. You don't have a relationship with God, okay? God is not real. He's not, okay? He's not talking to you. You're talking to yourself. The voice you hear in your head is your inner dialogue that, like, most people have. The feelings you get during worship are the same feelings someone gets from going to a Bad Bunny concert in Buenos Aires in Argentina. It's not God. You're not speaking in tongues. You guys are all if you listen to each other, you guys are all doing the same exact sounds and syllables over and over. Just like people did in ancient tribes when they did chanting. It's just glossolalia, where you turn off your brain and let your tongue just do what it wants, you know? It's kind of like stretching for your vocal cords and for your tongue. And when I tried to explain this to one of my friends who was in a charismatic church, you know, he wouldn't believe me, you know, because it was the first time he had ever heard of this term glossolalia, which is crazy to me because how do you not ever research? How do you not ever do any research? Or how do you never just dig in a little bit to what you actually believe? You know, it's a little bit crazy to me. It's like you've never asked any questions. You've never been curious at all to figure out how your religion came about. You know, how the Bible came about, how these rituals came about. But yeah, I look back on my life personally, and it's like I spent so many hundreds of hours, praying, trying to hear God. This is an ice cream stain, by the way. Trying to hear God when that shit was never real. Like God was never there. He still isn't. You know, praying doesn't do anything. You know, it makes you feel better in a sense because you think you're doing something productive, and because you've kind of been trained to think that praying is good, you know? And if you're conditioning someone and indoctrinating someone at a young enough age, you can make them believe that anything is a good thing. So, you know, that's why it's easy to believe that prayer is a good thing because you're taught it from such a young age. Just like you're taught to always obey your parents, you know? You're taught that that's a really good thing. And so you feel good when you do it, even if it isn't always actually the best thing for you. But yeah, a religion is just so rampant and prevalent in modern society that it's weird to me. And I can't help but make videos and talk about it a little bit because I go to a doctor's appointment and the only hospitals nearby me are hospitals with religious sayings in their name, like St. Vincent, St. Mary's, St. Jude's, Baptist Health, Adventist Hospital, Methodist Hospital. And it's weird. It's like, why is religion still everywhere? Why are we still doing this, people? I get that it's good to have community, but why don't we just have community that's not based around mystical beings, like fictional creatures? Why don't we just create community around volunteer events? That's what I would do. If I was really desperate for community, just go volunteer someplace and that it becomes your community. You don't have to make up this scripture or anything. But I'm not one to believe that community is actually the highest of goods. I don't really believe that community is that good of a thing, honestly. Or at the very least, I don't think community is a replacement for individualism. I think community can be a good thing, but in my experience, community has always looked like shrinking myself down to fit in with the community. You know, and I think the bigger community gets, that's what it can kind of turn into. And I don't think more is always better. I think if you have like maybe one or two people in your life that you're close with, I think that's good enough. I don't think you need a big community that you're meeting up with regularly. You don't even need one or two people. If you just have yourself, you're good. You know? Like, I don't think you should be relying on other people emotionally. I don't. I don't think it's healthy. Like, you shouldn't need to rely on people for your emotions. You know, you can talk about your emotions with other people just for funsies, but hopefully you don't feel like you need other people to be okay. But yeah, it's just weird whenever I guess Instagram knows that I used to be Christian or something. Because I just scroll through it and I see these videos of people in like Lubbock, Texas, having a worship session in someone's mansion. And there's like 30 people there, 30 like youth students there worshiping. And they're like on their knees, like bowing down, like crying and lifting their hands. And it's like, why are you doing this? Why? Like, why do you feel so tormented is almost my question. Like, why do you feel like you need to bow down to this imaginary creature? Like, your life is good. Like, life is generally pretty good. You don't need to be, like, praying and repenting and, like, confessing and doing all this ritualistic behavior. Like, what is it that is afflicting you so much that you feel like you need to do this? Like, there's not spirits. There is no spiritual war. No spiritual warfare. That is not a thing. That's not real. Like, I get the feeling of being around a bunch of people like that is intoxicating. But you can just go to, like, a Coldplay concert or something, too, you know? Although that would be more expensive, unfortunately, than just going to church, which is basically free. I don't know, it's just weird to me, like, it doesn't occur to you that, you know, something is wrong outside of your religious beliefs. Like, something is wrong if you're, you know, at a worship session and you're just crying and crying and crying and saying you're sorry and asking for forgiveness to a being that isn't real, that only exists in your head. Like, why do you think you're okay? You're not okay. And you have to keep doing this every single week. You feel the need to keep doing this every single week and you even want to do it. Like, why? Like, you don't need to be begging for forgiveness from a spiritual being that isn't real. You don't need to do that. You know, you're going to be okay. You know, the world is okay. We're okay. The world is not like being torn in pieces by the devil, you know. There's not like some deep sin in you that you need to eradicate. No, you're going to be okay. You know, you don't need to keep asking for forgiveness and begging and repenting to be okay. You know, you probably just need to maybe look into some therapeutic practices, do some psychotherapy, do some journaling, just do some thinking by yourself. Just feel some of your emotions that you've stuffed down. Examine your relationship with your parents. And then you'll realize, you know, you're probably just trying to fill in a void left by your parents with a spiritual relationship, you know. That deep longing you feel. You know, my dad used to always talk about how he had this like deep longing for a deep like relationship with Christ. And I'm like, now I realize, no, you don't long for Christ. You long for a deep relationship, a deep connection with another human being. because that is an intoxicating, beautiful feeling. And the reason you feel that longing is because you never had that desire fulfilled by your parents, who were supposed to have that relationship with you. You know? That's what you guys are longing for. If you feel this deep yearning for Christ or for Jesus, you just wish you had a better relationship with your parents and yourself. You know? Because people who have good relationships with their parents and themselves, they don't feel this yearning for Christ or for Jesus. They don't. I don't. It went away whenever I realized that I was just yearning. I was trying to fill a void left by my parents. That's what it was, you know. We don't have a hole in us that needs to be filled, you know. Like when you first popped out the womb, when you were a kid, do you remember feeling this yearning for Jesus, for God? No. You just yearned for your parents. And as you got older, you know, maybe you realized that your parents weren't giving you the affection that you wanted. And so you kind of tricked yourself into believing that, oh, you know, it's not my parents' affection I want, you know, because maybe you've come to believe that that wasn't actually possible. So you think to yourself, oh, well, no, it's a relationship with God that I'm missing. God isn't real, you know. That's not a relationship that you are yearning for. You just have a hole in your life, a void left by your parents. And I really don't like that. Like, if someone invites me to church or something, I'm supposed to be like, oh, no thanks. No thanks. I appreciate the invitation, but like, I'm good, you know. Like, no, I want to be like, no, I'm not going to church with you because you're delusional. What you believe in isn't real. Why do you believe this? Why are you doing this to yourself? That's what I want to say. That's what we should say. It's just crazy how big religion is still. That it's even still a thing. It's still a word. Like, why? I think it's just the greatest example of herd mentality in all of human history. Because there really there's really not logical reasons to be religious. It's just like emotional herd mentality, you know, trying to fit into a group. But yeah, if you can't really explain how your relationship with Jesus works, it's because he isn't real. That's why you have a hard time explaining it. You know, because it's not hard to explain the relationship you have with yourself, your coworkers, your boss, your friends, your family. That's not hard to explain. You know, why would it be? If you actually have a relationship with this Jesus person, why is it so hard to explain? If it's actually real. You know, because you ask like 10 Christians about their relationship with Jesus and you get 10 different answers. Which doesn't really make sense if it's the same person, you know. But yeah, I guess I'll say it again that I think the main reason people become religious is because of an emotional hole that's in their life. Like people don't become religious for logical reasons. They do it because there's a hole in their life emotionally. You know, and believing that there's someone out there that's taking care of them and watching down on them. You know, that's a reassuring feeling, especially if you didn't have parents or anyone that was there for you as a kid. You know, or you're just extremely emotionally attached to your family and your parents who are already religious and you can't bear to be without them. And so you're not going to ever consider not being religious because it feels too good to be a part of something.